Is there anything on your mind? Troubling thoughts?
Remember, you just say to yourself, I run my mind, it does not run me. Say it with me.
I run my mind. It doesn't run me.
Feeling positive?
I run my mind.
Nervous?
And it doesn't run me.
Everyone thinks you're crazy.
Help me.
I run my mind.
Positive?
It doesn't run me.
If you do something really bad, how do you undo that?
You just need to remember who you are again.
Music is a blood sport. It's sacrifice.
If you're not careful, bad things could happen.
Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. And today for our AAFCA Roundtable, we are talking with a group of emerging filmmakers who are part of the Blumhouse series of thrillers that are coming just in time for Halloween. We're going to get things started today by introducing those AAFCA members on this call, starting with Katia Woods in Philadelphia, Aisha Muhammad in Philadelphia, Rhonda Rasha Penrice in Atlanta, Janita Davis in Michigan City, Indiana, Carolyn Hines in Toronto, Nancy Green in Los Angeles, and Carolyn, our second Carolyn, I don't know what market you're in. What market are you in, Carolyn?
I'm in Toronto.
Oh, so both of you are in
Yeah,
Toronto.
we're both in Toronto, yeah.
I did not know that we had two Canadians who were members. So
Yeah.
thank you. So we're going to take you across the border without a passport today to but without further ado, we're going to start. I love thrillers, horrors, horror movies. I'd like to ask each of you, what was your attraction to taking on these particular projects?
Yeah, so for me, I have never done a horror or a thriller. My films prior to this have been coming of age, subtle, sensitive dramas. And so for me, what spoke to me about this project was the fact that it was both a horror film, but it also had that sensitivity to it that I knew I could bring to it.
Who's there?
The project was originally written by Stephen Herman, so he had a great initial draft, and Blumhouse just wanted to know what else I can add to it, what my take could be, and I like leaning into the personal. I think Stephen did a really good job of creating a really terrifying creature in the Backwards Man, which appears in as Nolan starts to dig through his memories. I think that had an effect on me as a reader, but also just Nolan's devotion to his daughter was like really, really gripping, and kept me going through the story. But as I was thinking about what to add to it, I thought that the story could be about a flawed man, who through amnesia was getting the chance to be a better man and a better father for the sake of his daughter. And so, Blumhouse loved it, Amazon loved it, the producers, Jay Ellis, Aaron Bergman, Lisa Bruce, and Manette Louie, they all loved it. And so they chose me to do the project. And so, yeah, that's how the film came to be.
Zoo, what about for you?
Well, I wrote my movie, I wrote Nocturne, and I wrote it alone with nobody attached 2 or 3 years ago on spec.
What makes Vivian the star?
Jules, I'll always be there for you.
And you, whatever you are.
What if I could be more? What if I could be great? All I need is a chance to prove myself.
I don't know how it got to Blumhouse and Amazon, but apparently it landed on someone's desk one day and they passed it through the company. And when they came to me, it was with the kind of offer fully formed to join on with this amazing slate. And she does part of Welcome to the Blumhouse. Obviously, I grabbed onto that because what an amazing opportunity. But as for the film itself, it's largely based on my own experiences as a teenager playing classical music. I grew up playing classical music. I was very competitive, very territorial. I was a violinist, which is notoriously full of very neurotic musicians. As an instrument, it tends to attract that kind of personality. And although I kind of grew out of those traits, I remember all the kids I grew up alongside and their level of dedication to this very arcane and old-fashioned art. And I always found it interesting as a kind of exploration of sacrifice. And that's kind of how Nocturne evolved.
Rajiv?
Sure, yeah. So, in our case, we came on actually quite late. It was already set up at Blumhouse with this slate when we came on. These two scripts had been written already.
Hey,
Hey,
have we met?
wow, I use that line a lot.
I'm Sandeep.
Pallavi.
Beautiful name.
Thank you.
And I think what we loved about it was we loved that it was taking a very kind of like almost tropey traditional story of like the arranged marriage, the Indians, the kind of like Made in Heaven, or like this show on Netflix is really popular, Indian matchmaking, but taking it and then applying it to these sort of thematics of domestic abuse and reincarnation, and like using that base as a thriller, I thought was really, it was a very smart way to do it. And we particularly like that the kind of Indian mom character typically in these movies is very one note. It's very like, all she is the mom who's the overbearing. And we love that it's like, it starts that way, but then you find out she has this sexual violent past. And, we have always loved movies about characters that are on the fringes, where it's like the person that normally is just a side character, but they actually have hopes and dreams and backgrounds. And I think often parents are treated as like just this thing. So we love this idea of doing that, plus mixing our upbringing, kind of Hindu mythology, and taking it but using it in a horror way. And we're horror fans. We made a supernatural thriller teen series for Netflix last year, so we've sort of been in this realm, I guess, for a while. So.
And Veena?
I mean, in a nutshell, I have always been interested in, and I was definitely interested in the lie and exploring the terrible things that we do in the name of love.
Hey, bet they thought they were going to get away with this, huh?
Excuse me?
Brittany and Kayla didn't make it to the dance camp. Didn't the school call you?
No, Kayla's sick. I kept her home this weekend.
I was sure they were doing this together. You know, they're with their secret plans.
As a parent myself, the notion of a child who's damaged, who then commits a horrible crime, and what I would do, what would truly be my response in that situation, was fascinating and terrifying to contemplate. And how the moral veneer, of who we think we are, falls away so quickly when a child we love is in trouble.
Hi, everybody. Aisha Muhammad, Black People Watch. My question is for Veena in The Lie. The parents just made at every turn the absolute worst decision they could make in this movie. And again, like you said, it was terrifying, me being a parent myself and having your child get into some trouble and trying to get them out. What was it like for you trying to create that intensity in that movie?
It was horrifying because, as writers, we actually have to go to that place that we're trying to make. I tried to make my characters do the best thing that they could do in the worst situation possible. And so on the surface, there's throughout the movie, I myself, and I know the audiences are like, oh my God, please don't do that. But there really is no choice. There really is no other choice other than giving their daughter up. And mom is a lawyer and she's worked in criminal justice and she knows how completely damaged the criminal justice system is. So she makes this decision that the most interesting thing to me writing mysteries is how nobody wants to see themselves in a situation like this, where your moral center is questioned. We want to think and believe that we do the right thing every time and at every turn. And so this film in particular is a real challenge because they're making worse and worse and worse and darker decisions, you know, till it culminates in the end the way it does in terms of protecting their child. So for me as a mom, I hold myself up for a few weeks. I think at one point I didn't even leave the house for a week because I had to go there and think about what would I do, and it was horrifying.
And then COVID hit. Now you're at home all the time.
All the time.
Thank you. And all the movies were terrifying in a very good way.
My question is for Zoo. Is that how you say your name? I'm sorry if I mispronounced it.
Yeah, that's right.
About your film was that what was more scary for me is that the main character wasn't quite aware that she was being used as a vessel for the evil until it was almost too late. And it's like, you know, she has this notebook, all this stuff is happening, but she just looks at it as kind of like her lucking out, not understanding that she's being used and all these different dominoes were happening. Was it something that you purposely wanted us to go on the ride with her to have that experience? Because I really like the fact that it took us a minute to be like, okay, why is she not catching on?
A couple of things. Firstly, obviously, it's kind of when we created the supernatural entity and kind of worked out how that and the main narrative would thread alongside one another. For me, it was important that it not be too overt. And I think to Juliet, you know, whatever's in the book and whatever steps she takes along her journey are kind of inevitable. And they're inevitable for the audience as well. It was never supposed to be a big surprise. I think horror is full of tropes like that. And as soon as we see a book full of maniacal drawings, we know that they're going to happen. But secondly, I would, you know, ask the question, is she being used by a supernatural entity? I hope there is a reading of the movie where this is all in Juliet's head to some extent. Certainly the ending is meant to be able to be read a couple of different ways. And if everything is in her head, then she wouldn't necessarily make those connections particularly readily. But yes, you point out something very astute, which is that it does take her a while. And by the time she realizes the connection that the audience has already realized, in a kind of dramatic irony, it is too late. She's already taken too many steps along that path.
Hey, it's Rhonda. For Ilan and Rajiv and Emmanuel, both of your films like rely a lot on flashback and so forth. Was this a technique that you guys used in your previous work, and why did you find it, how did you find using it in this particular project?
Do you mind if I go Ilan? Rajiv?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so for me, I had always saw Black Box when I came to it, and I was trying to, you know, add more of a personal spin to it. You know, the original was a little bit more of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation where Nolan was taking over and then Thomas was taking over, and, you know, it was kind of a back and forth fight. But I've always, you know, this is obviously a spoiler, so just for people that haven't watched it yet, but I've always seeing the film as like a character study of Thomas, you know. So Thomas is a guy that he didn't make the right choices. He wasn't the most devoted father. He wasn't, you know, he didn't love his daughter, you know. He didn't take care of his daughter the same way Nolan took care of his daughter. He didn't have a relationship with his wife that Nolan had with his own wife. And so for me, the flashbacks, you know, I mean, I call them, I almost play the memories, the memory experiences as flashbacks as well. And they're always supposed to be a juxtaposition between, you know, who Thomas was and the mistakes he made versus this other man, Nolan. And, you know, the expectations that Ava and Gary have of their, you know, the father and their friend, who was this devoted, loving, overall good, supportive father. So for me, the flashbacks are supposed to play as juxtapositions of, you know, the choices you make in life and, you know, the impact of those choices. I'd never, and to answer your question directly, I'd never really used flashbacks in my previous work, mainly because I think when you go into flashback, it takes away from the story and it slows down the narrative. But in my case, I think it propels the narrative because I think when you make a thriller, one of the things I learned making this is that, you know, there's opportunity for reflection and contemplation and character building, but people watch thrillers because they constantly want to be questioned. They constantly want they want to be at the edge of their seat. So scenes should either raise tension or should, you know, provoke question. You know, so I think flashbacks do that in my film.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, we had the challenge in that we had a movie that the original play was all phone calls, was 100% phone calls. It was based on an audio play by Madhuri Shekhar. And so we had to figure out how to make the film, one, cinematic, as well as alluding to what was going on in the mother's head and what had happened before, and to sort of sprinkle clues throughout, but in a visual way, in a visual way. And so I also think that we wanted to really to evoke this sense of India from the past. And so I think that, so part of the flashbacks was to, like, normally we wouldn't, I mean, we haven't used flashbacks that much in our previous work, but because we wanted to see what happened, and because, you know, all the events of the movie sort of they all circled around this one singular event, we really wanted to see this event and to see India, and this was our best way to do it.
Also add that our film's thematic is about the cycle of violence. I mean, ultimately it's about the way domestic abuse tends to kind of come back around and around and around. And so the idea of reincarnation was a metaphorical stand-in for that. And so the idea of the mom constantly reliving the past was a big thematic. And so I think showing that physically was, you know, kind of as you know, Manuel was saying, like, I think flashbacks can be used very inartfully and be kind of like a cheat. But I think in our case, I think flashbacks work when they're character based, when it's like, you know, we're not using flashbacks just because, we're using them because the mom is literally reliving these moments again and again and can't get past them. So it's a character based use versus just like a quick and dirty exposition use, which I think is kind of the lazy way to do it. So.
Well, I enjoyed them both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jonita Davis from the Black Cape. I enjoyed all the movies. Emmanuel, your movie gave me nightmares of the backwards man coming out of everywhere in my house. And, you know, I love the lie with just the way that the parents were gripping the daughter at the end. Like, if they let her go, they were going to have to kill her, like, you know, or ever do something to her. Zoo's movie and the Dasanis, your movies were, they kind of had less of an obvious, I don't know, it seems less of an obvious monster. I mean, in the lie, the monster seemed to be like, it appeared to be like the friend's father, but I mean, yours, it was more of an emotional tension building type of thing, it felt. For the both of you, I want to ask, what is your technique for building that, you know, kind of aura of, you know, for the audience of, you know, just spooky without being spooky, without having the monster?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. I don't think I have a technique. I wouldn't say, you know, I haven't written a screenplay like this before. So this was the first time I was doing it. But it was always important to me that there wouldn't be a monster in the movie. In many ways, we called it the golden light very dramatically on set when we were making the movie. But in some ways, you know, you can interpret that as a supernatural entity, as a monster. In this movie, equally, it could kind of just be a projection of Juliet's hopes and dreams. What was important to me with that light was that it remained indecipherable in some way, because I think the supernatural should be indecipherable. It was also important to me that it not be overtly demonic, despite the drawings in the book feeling quite demonic. They actually feature a lot of biblical imagery, a lot of classical imagery. And I wanted the light to tread that threshold between divine and devilish. Because at the end of the day, it's a force that could be bringing Juliet great good as well as great evil. She certainly thinks it's bringing good. So yes, that's a really good point. It's not really a monster. It could be an angel.
From our side, I'd sort of say two things. I think one is that our monster basically is hiding in plain sight. Like, it's something where I think what's interesting about Sandeep and ours is that he is, I think something that we kind of learned as we did research about kind of domestic abusers is that very little of the abuse is the actual physical abuse, and so much of it is psychological. So economic isolation, isolating from your friends, gaslighting, making someone feel like they need this person. And I think it was something where we like this idea of seeing Sandeep kind of like, even as he seems like a wonderful, perfect boyfriend, we see these things start to creep in until he becomes the actual monster by the end. But the reality is he's been that monster the entire time. And I think there's something fun about, as it's a monster in plain sight. And the second thing I'd say is that in terms of kind of how we think about thrillers and horror films, is that I think a great horror film taps into a very primal fear that's entirely non-conceptual or like non-genre, and then applies genre to it. So like the fear of your daughter being influenced or being potentially hurt and you're so far away, I think is very primal to a parent. Like the fear of a parent losing her mind and like, you know, not knowing how to help her is also very primal. And I think there's something very scary about taking that, but then we love taking that primal fear, but then putting in this supernatural. I think Zoo's absolutely right. Like supernatural should be mysterious, and I feel like it works well when we know the rules, but the audience doesn't, where they're sort of like trying to figure out, because I think that's how you build tension. Tension is fundamentally just, you don't know what's going to happen. And I think, you know, that's the key.
I'll also add that, I mean, Sandeep to me is, I mean, I would have loved to see the movie where he's the main character, because to me, he's a tragic figure who never knew who he was. And him learning that he's this monster from the past should be heartbreaking, but also invigorating, where it's like, oh, I finally know who I am. I mean, you know, to me, he's like Macbeth or something, which I think is something where, so I saw him as the hero of his own story, and I'd love to see that movie someday.
There's something funny. There's something fun about a character who kind of figures himself out just to figure out, oh shit, I'm a really bad person. Like, yeah. So you were saying Emmanuel,
you had similar thing in your movie. So.
No, that's what I was gonna say. I almost feel like our films all complement each other, because in many ways my film is that story, you know. So yeah.
Thank you so much. They were all very, very, very good movies. Thank you. And you're right, Emmanuel. Your movie was Sandeep's movie. Yeah, I got to think about that a little bit. Mind blowing moment right there. So thank you so much.
They're actually all set in the same cinematic universe.
Yeah.
There is a team up movie coming up. I hope you guys are excited about it.
So I have an ongoing series on Afrofuturism, and I thought that your film really encapsulated that without kind of all the bells and whistles of science fiction. It just kind of seemed really organic. But I also think that it's really important to see Black people in that scientific realm, because you don't often see that. Did you have that in mind when you were kind of, when you were directing, when it was being written, or like, because I know you Stephen Herman wrote it. But could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm Black and I don't really I've been lucky to go to like good schools and, you know, hang around with see a lot of Black doctors and Black researchers. And for me, it's normal, you know? But in terms of Lillian, so in the original script, Lillian was younger. She was a doctor with a home practice. She wasn't a part of this major research facility or this major hospital. And so when I was thinking about one, who would play Lillian, and two, like how she would present herself to the world, it was very intentional to make her, like, in many ways, I wanted Lillian to be like the Brene Brown of neuropsychiatry. That was like always the image that I had in my head. And so the choice of introducing her at her own TED Talk as like the keynote speaker and making sure that, you know, she was speaking to, you know, speaking at a major conference with, you know, major attendance, that character introduction was important for me. Just the way she dressed, the way she carried herself, the way she was recognized by other doctors in the hospital. Just small moments like that, I thought really kind of established who she was as a character. And yeah, me and Miss Rashad had conversations about just you know, what her backstory was. And you don't see her backstory in the film, but I think it becomes apparent in the type of, in the way she delivers dialogue and the way she carries herself and the way she, even like a lot of the conversations me and Miss Rashad had ended up resulting in changes in her wardrobe and accessories. And, you know, yeah, so I definitely did think about how to present you know, the doctor in this film. Yeah. I'm not sure if that answers your question directly, but.
No, and she was so fantastic and you know, it's not a typical role for her because she's usually playing like this nurturing, you know, kind mother, but you do see that nurturing side of her. And you do, and I don't think, like, I guess you're talking about like her background and what builds her up to become this very prominent doctor and someone who has that high visibility, which is, I think it's really amazing that it's not kind of made a huge deal, but it is, right?
Yeah,
So,
it is. It is. You know, and if we had more real estate, you know, more time, it would have been nice to maybe have a scene where she's with other doctors so we get a sense of what she can lose as a result of, you know, doing her thing in this film, you know, which I won't reveal. But yeah.
Thank you. And I loved all the films, by the way. Thank you so much.
Emmanuel, my question is for you. Katya Woods here again, a couple social out of Philadelphia. My question is for you, for the young lady that played the daughter. Where did you find her? And she was so amazing. You know what I mean? Like, you really, really, like, you wanted to hug her. You wanted to protect her. All of her charm, everything. You're just like, dude, show up on time for school. Where did you find her? And she's just absolutely like, thumbs up on that find.
Yeah, that's John McAlery. I think he was all of our casting directors. I'm not sure if this is the case for Vina as well, but he was all of our casting directors. And yeah, like I saw about 20 to 30 kids for this role, ranging from like 5 to 15. And, you know, I wanted somebody, like, it was tricky because you didn't want Ava to come across as too old, you know, and too bratty and too mature, because when she loses her father, or when we feel like she's starting to lose her father, you know, we need to feel for her. We need to feel that she can't survive without a parent. And so the balance between innocence and precociousness was really, really, really important to me. And when Amanda Christine is her name, when Amanda came in, I had everybody, you know, I had everybody do sides from that scene when Thomas screams at Ava, you know, when he tells her he's going to drop her off at Gary's house, and she just starts pestering him and asking him why she has to go to Gary's house and what she can do to help him instead of going to Gary's house. Just the way she reacted when her father just suddenly shifted and changed was just very, very, very natural, but, you know, just very heartbreaking, you know. She wasn't really trying either, you know, and I gave her, you know, we call them adjustments in the directing world, but like I gave her direction so that she could read the scene a different way, just to see how flexible she was. And she like took direction like that. And every time that I gave her direction, I didn't have to, like on set, I mean, I didn't have to speak to her like a child. I spoke to her the same way I spoke to Mamadou, who was incredible. You know, she's very intellectual, very cerebral, and she did her homework. Yeah, but she actually kept everybody on their toes, including Mr. Shad. She was always on. So.
You know, I want to ask the Dasani brothers. I mean, it's rare to see two people direct. So how did the two of you navigate that?
It was a tricky challenge for sure. I mean, we've directed short films together before, but this was the first feature that we've done. I'll say that the first thing we had to do was figure out who was going to say action. At first, we tried to do it every other take, and
it went disastrously,
terribly.
It did not work.
And so we ultimately sort of did every other scene, which worked well. It was fun. But you know, I think it's something where what we found was that we generally had similar tastes and we could catch each other, and I think that is the sort of benefit of it. And when we disagreed, I think that the benefit of having two of us is that when we did disagree, it was usually not like a fundamental disagreement, but there was some issue with the scene or with what we were doing, or a story problem or a logic issue. We're like, okay, why are we disagreeing? What's the reason?
It like
for
helped
this?
us identify actually problems along the way. And I think it was nice to have someone you totally trust who kind of check you constantly. So we very rarely would we actually hit an impasse. It occasionally would happen, at which times we would go into a private room and kind of have it out. But it was,
then we'd horse trade where we're like, all right, well, I'll win this one.
There were definitely times when it's like,
later,
I believe in this, let me have it. And then he'd take something else. He'd call me and be like, remember that thing I gave you? Now I'm cashing my chips, you know what I mean? But it worked well. And I think also what was beneficial is we generally were working together, but sometimes we were able to split the unit, meaning that like I could be working with an actor while Ilan was with camera, or I could, you know, be off approving a set, you know, design while he was then approving costumes. Like we generally didn't do that. I mean, for the most part, we worked together because we like to kind of check, but that was also, it's just nice to have two brains, you know, and be in two places at once. So.
I thought it was cool. You guys did a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
For Emmanuel. So for Nolan, he basically has cognitive impairment as a result of his injury. And how did you go about doing research for that character?
You know, when you watch the film, you realize, and I apologize if some of you haven't seen the film. I'm talking to the filmmakers mainly, but I'm gonna have to spoil a little bit. But when you watch the film, you realize that he didn't have amnesia. He wasn't dealing with, you know, cognitive brain.
What? I had no idea. I was kidding.
You know, and so, but at the same time, it needs to feel that way at the beginning. And so I am a very specific, very detail-oriented director in general. I like to, you know, at least in terms of the black box, even when I was creating the black box or figuring out how to manifest it in the film, I wanted to build it based on technologies that existed in real life. So the EEG, like hypnosis, the idea of, you know, taking brainwave data and repurposing it so that they created images, and you were able to project memories and memories in real time. That's based on a real life research project that's being done at MIT. But in terms of like Nolan's experience of the world in the first half of the film, I couldn't base that. Like you're at the end of the day, you're telling a story. You're making a film, and so it's not exactly true to science because he's also not really an amnesiac, you know. So there were things in terms of like how, you know, what a CT scan looks like when somebody has brain damage, or what an MRI looks like when somebody has brain damage, or the symptoms that somebody's supposed to, you know, have when they have brain damage. That's all real. And that's stuff that I researched with a pediatric neurologist, a friend of mine, but also a neuropsychologist. So I talked to them a lot when I was writing this film, but in terms of just how Nolan is manifesting his own symptoms in the first half of the film, that's not necessarily science-based because he's not actually an amnesiac. So I think there's a balance between, being true to science and actually just telling a story that is suspenseful and engaging.
Yeah, so my question is for Emmanuel about the black box. I was wondering if for the movie there was any research done about the different types of, possibly personality disorders that can be caused with traumatic brain injury and personality changes, like when there was a case a while ago when a woman, she was in a coma for several months and she woke up and then she suddenly liked bananas, which she had never done before. Was that something that you thought about with this?
Not particularly. It kind of goes back to Carolyn's question a little bit. For me, the story was like Thomas is in the body the entire time, and so Thomas just doesn't fully remember who he is. And so it's not, you can't really lean into science because the idea of implanting somebody else's consciousness into somebody's body is not something that's happened quite yet, So for me, it was just all about I think Thomas is constantly searching for some sort of familiarity and some sort of stability. But I didn't lean into cases of multiple personality disorder or anything like that in order to characterize Mamadou's performance in any way.
My question is for Vina. I wanted to come back and ask about the tension you built with the parents having to navigate this lie that they kind of doubted themselves with their daughter. But most of the times when we see stuff like this in fiction, it's like that can't happen in real life. But I could see myself, and I think a lot of people identified with the film, and it's terrifying because we could see ourselves making those decisions that get progressively worse for our kid. How did you walk that line with keeping the fiction and keeping the story, but keeping those decisions and the actions kind of relatable? I mean, or I don't want to say, close to reality, but keeping them to where they felt like something that the average parent would actually do for their kid.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is constructing character from the inside out. So for me, it was trying to really know who each of those characters were, each of those parents. And I like to talk about my characters in terms of what is the guiding principle of this person's life. And so what is the thing that is the most important thing that drives them pretty much in every action that they do, whether they're aware of it or not. And so using that kind of backbone and creating Jay and Rebecca in particular helped me just ground every action, which were not always compatible. They were clearly at loggerheads many times throughout the movie, but what would be a natural instinct and a natural reaction. So with Rebecca, shame, blame, with Jay, avoidance, head in the sand. And those are the two worst possible reactions in people to be in a situation like this. And so that also is, drama. If you kind of put yin and yang together, and see what unfolds from that versus people who are completely capable and know exactly what they're doing, which is none of us, right? None of us know what we're doing really at the end of the day, especially with our children.
I really, really enjoyed it.
Hey, for the Dasani twins, I wanted to kind of go back. You kind of touched on kind of applying domestic violence to these kind of concepts of reincarnation and karma. Could you just give a little bit more detail on that? Because I really found that to be one of the most fascinating elements of Eagle Eye.
Sure. I think when we first got the script, kind of our way into it, our pitch, honestly, to Amazon and Blumhouse was that we saw this idea of I think that it's interesting thinking about why
why is it a cycle of abuse? Like, why do so many women return to their abusers? What is the attraction to these men? And also, why do men do it as well? And I think that's something we found really interesting. I think there's a lot of it's about power and about the idea of, I think, abusers and in general, like, I think there's a sense of they almost get off on the control, exerting control over someone's life. I mean, the idea that this person is dependent on me and I'm going to make their decisions. You know, Sandeep in the film says to her several times, like, everything I do is for your own good. And I think there's something interesting about that concept of, like, you know, there's an old saying that we really believe in, which is that, you know, like, everyone's a hero of their own story, including the villain. So it's like, he believes he's doing the right thing. He believes that he's making Usha's life better because of what he's doing. He truly does believe he's like doing it for their own good. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic of kind of watching. I mean, Usha, a lot of her story, I think, has to do with coming to basically understand that she doesn't have to blame. I think she blames herself for allowing herself to be in the cycle. And I think something that her arc in the film is coming to realize that she doesn't have to blame herself. Like, she can take control of her own life, even if the cycle continues. Like, she can fight it instead of accepting it.
So this is also something where, look, I mean, there's something where history, you know, as we all know, history repeats itself. But the reason the history repeats itself is that people are not always students of history. If we just look back, and, you know, I think that we often, you know, we make assumptions, and Usha makes assumptions about how things were. She's like, I killed someone, therefore I'm bad. It's just, you know, that it's my fault.
And it's dogged her whole life, like this kind of self-blame.
Well, and it's this idea that if she, you know, that she's not looking, like, she's trying not to repeat history, but by trying not to repeat history, she's repeating history. She's pushing her daughter into it, like, by trying not to push her daughter into it. It's like, literally, the cycle is like repeating, and she's not seeing that it's not about her daughter, it's about her. She can't solve her daughter's problem. She can't help her daughter until she helps herself, which I think is something where, you know, oftentimes we think about helping other people. We're like, you need to eat better, you need to do this, you need to do that, but then we don't do it to ourselves. We don't take care of ourselves. And so self-love is a very important aspect that is neglected, I think, like society-wide, and this is just a microcosm of that.
Thank you. I think it's also very interesting. I think that we are not used to seeing domestic violence presented in this way. And particularly, like, we're not used to men handling domestic violence in this way. And just listening to you guys and, like, just, I guess, applying a more clinical psychological approach, it touches you in ways I haven't seen before. And so, thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will say that, I mean, we have to give a lot of credit to the writer, Madhuri Shekhar. I think there was something really, really nice about working with like, essentially having both perspectives. I mean, her perspective as a you know, a female writer of color, and then us as male, you know, directors. It was just helpful to sort of have both sides and be both of us. I think she gained from us and we gained from her, and that was really, really nice. So
it was also really helpful having someone of Sarita's experience, because Sarita brought a lot to that we just, like, we get a lot of credit for stuff that she did.
Yeah, which is like incredible. So, powerhouse actress. I'll just add one last little thing, which is that I mentioned earlier, kind of that, like, that this character's one note often, the, like, you know, overbearing Indian mom, but Sarita's casting was so critical to making it work, because, like, she herself was like, I'm not this mom, and we basically told her, we're like, Sarita, sorry to say it this way to her, but she laughed. She loved it. We're like, you have this, like, sexual violent past, Kama Sutra, you know, Misala, Perfect Murder, and you bring that context to the role. So we want you, not just like mom number 7. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Well, Zoo, Emmanuel, Vina, and the Dasani brothers, thank you so much. Thank you for your contribution to the series. It was truly great. I know I'll be rewatching all of them over again throughout this month and in months to come. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, we thank you for your time, and we hope that each of you will continue to follow us as we follow you. and know that you can count on our support with this project and with your next as well. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.